Hello there and welcome back. I'm so excited that you're joining me today. And as you might know, this channel is all about inspiring you and giving you tips and tricks to have a more organized life and space so that you can have more time and energy for the things that matter in your world. I'm an avid minimalist, but you really don't have to be because this channel can give you a lot of inspiration anyway. But I also want to be very realistic and very practical because however organized you are in life, there are those times that are just going to get a bit crazy. There's lots going on, and that's been the last few weeks for me. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you the 3 key things that I often do when things pile up a little bit. And I'm also going to share with you some meal prep inspiration that I did over the weekend. So let's dive in with a quick update what's been going on in my world. I personally am a huge fan of changing things up and making plans and budgets to make cool things happen. And if you've been following along in the channel, you might know that I got married earlier this year. I've done a video about the type of elopement wedding that we did, which I will link up here as well as below. So we got married, we moved into our brand new house. There is an empty house tour. Also, I will link that up here for you. And I will do some more tours of our home in weeks and months to come. But there's been a big year already. And when we moved into the house, I thought, my goodness, this will be great. Now, we've waited so long for this new house to be built. Now we can really relax. Well, that wasn't quite the case. There was a lot of landscaping and other work that needed to happen after we got occupancy to the house. And we've certainly done a great job, I think, transforming the outside space from basically a muddy dirt pile to an actual blank canvas that we can plant some beautiful plants in spring. I live in Melbourne, Australia, if you're new here. So for us, spring kind of starts in September, October, very opposite to those of you watching from the Northern Hemisphere. So there's been a lot going on, and specifically on the house front, one thing that really threw me off in the last few weeks is that we've been having a water leak. So we've had a leak in our bedroom window and ceiling, and maybe it doesn't look very big to the naked eye, but I tell you, it's actually quite stressful to have to deal with tradies and have to try and work out where this water is coming from. So the last few weeks have actually been really stressful working with our builder, the people who installed our solar panels, to just try to get to the bottom of where is all this water coming in from. And if you are living in a new house or have any flavor of experience of what I'm talking about, you know how stressful it can be. So that's really thrown me off. But then the other thing that's been happening is I've also started a new job. So a couple of weeks ago, I started a new full-time gig and it is really fun. I'm absolutely loving it. My colleagues are wonderful. But starting a new job and dealing with the house stuff really just kind of drained all my energy levels. So my reset that I do every single time, I'm going to talk you through today. One of the first things that goes out the window for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, is healthy habits. So when we get really busy, what tends to happen is we stop going to the gym, we stop having that healthy movement, and we stop feeding our bodies with healthy food and go for junk food instead because it seems quicker and easier. But I tell you, one thing that I do is to reset with my meal planning. So I've shown this on the channel before, but I normally just do this on paper. You can do this in any form that works for you and your family or whomever you live with. We do intermittent fasting in the morning, so we don't eat breakfast. So I typically meal plan for lunch and dinner a week at a time. Now, if you've never meal planned before, feel free to start meal planning for just your dinners or just your lunches, whatever is easiest for you to get started. This exercise is normally something my partner and I do together, but you can easily do this yourself if you prefer, if you're the main person in your family who plan the meals. So normally what I'll do is I'll look in my fridge, freezer and pantry and look at what needs to be used up, if there's anything that's risking to go bad, because I hate throwing food away. And then I just write out what we want to eat. Now, we are more than happy to eat the same food about 2 days in a row. So you'll see here with the batch meal prep that I'm about to show you that I'm actually going to do about 3 or so meals of some of these things. And that's just a great way to really stretch your food. If you don't really like to eat the same thing, for example, if you do a big batch of soup that I'll be doing, if you don't want to eat the same thing 3 times that week, you can obviously freeze some of it as well. So this is a very simple exercise. I'm just writing out the things, the ideas that I have on my little piece of paper, and you will see that there is a bit of repetition here. So this is all you got to do. This is in real time. So this whole thing probably took me a couple of minutes of looking in my pantry and about 2 minutes to write it down. So that's it. And let's dive into the meal prep itself. I'm going to be showing you a hummus, a homemade hummus for snacks. We're going to do 2 main meals and a dessert. And this entire meal prep you're about to see probably took me less than 2 hours. I want to say an hour and a half on my Sunday afternoon. So I'd done my workout, got some movement in, and then I meal prepped these things. This hummus, by the way, I will link the recipe below. It's so easy to make. It's cheaper than buying hummus in the supermarket, at least here in Australia, with the prices we currently have. So, and one of these jars of tahini, if you buy them, if you're not familiar with tahini, they last a good while in the fridge. So you can keep them for quite a while. So I normally do this about once a week. We like hummus with carrot sticks or cucumber or celery. You can have it with crackers. There's a lot of different ways you can put it in your sandwiches. But I normally just make up a batch like this and keep it in the fridge over the course of the week. And snacks is often something that we forget about. So I know a lot of people who are really good at meal prepping dinners and lunches, but those snacks in between, whether you prefer to have fruit, muesli bars, if you prefer something more protein heavy like boiled eggs or something like that, if you are getting into meal planning and more familiar with it, do consider some options that will really help you stay organized through the week and feed your body healthy fuel. So yeah, this recipe, like I said, is super duper easy. And if you don't really love hummus, there is a lot of other dips and things like that that you can make yourself. But yeah, so I'm just getting all my ingredients ready for this recipe. As you can probably tell, you will need some form of food processor or stick blender, etc. And yeah, just mix that up. So I've put all my ingredients except the chickpeas in, giving that a really good blend. I didn't have garlic cloves, so I just used minced garlic for this recipe, but you can use actual garlic cloves as well. And then just chucking the chickpeas in there, making sure to get everything out of the jar, adding a little bit more of the chickpea liquid, and then giving that a really good blend. By the way, who else loves watching things like blend? I really like this part of the process when you're making a dip or something like that. Now, the thing about this recipe as well, you can make it as liquidy or as solid as you like. I only used about half of the liquid from the can there, but it's really up to you what texture you like. Normally, this recipe ends up being a little bit more runny at this stage, but when you put it in the fridge, it will kind of solidify a little bit. So yeah, just pop that in a tub. I normally, like I said, keep this in the fridge for up to a week. And have never had any problems with it. But it's so easy, and I, by the way, really like to meal prep in clear containers because that way both my husband and I can see what's in the tub and make sure that things don't get hidden in the back of the fridge and we forget what we have during the busy week. So there you go, homemade hummus for very little money. Now we're going to dive into a meal prep of a soup, or you could probably even call it a stew. It's quite a hearty soup. I don't have a particular recipe for this, but you'll see the proportions sort of here on the screen. Feel free to comment below if you want me to actually write down the whole recipe for this. I'd be happy to do that if you want that. But essentially, this is a great way to use up any vegetables that you have in the house. I make this with minced beef, or today I'm using a mix of minced beef and pork. But it's totally up to you. If you want to make this a vegetarian version, you could probably chuck some beans and other things in as well. But today I'm using potato, carrot, and a sweet potato that was hanging out in my pantry that needed to be used up. You see that this one has a couple of little brown spots on it. I ended up cutting a few of those off, but don't be afraid to use vegetables that, you know, when you cut them open, you can see in the middle that this is perfectly fine to use. So definitely don't be afraid to use vegetables that look sort of slightly questionable. As long as they smell okay and there's no brown in the middle of them, they are usually perfectly fine to use. I definitely try to do big batch cooking, things like this, to use things up, because I really do hate throwing food away, even if it's just, that half a bag of lettuce that's gotten stuck in your veggie crisper. But aside from having healthy food throughout the week and spending this hour and a half, 2 hours doing this meal prep, I have actually learned over time to find this way of like working with my hands and cooking very therapeutic. If you would have asked me years ago, I would have never thought that preparing cooking videos on YouTube was something that I would be doing. But it is very therapeutic. When I do this, I will usually put on some nice music in my kitchen, or listen to a podcast, learn something, or get reminded of, healthy habits and healthy ways of relating to myself and looking after myself. So I've got my veggies ready here, and on my stove I've got the biggest pot that I have. I probably need to buy a slightly larger one for these batch cooking meals. But yeah, just adding my vegetables here, starting with a little bit of oil and my onion, and getting that ready. By the way, onion with a little bit of cracked black pepper at the start point is just really, really nice. So I'm starting with that, and at the same time I've boiled my kettle, and I've got a couple of cubes here of beef stock. You can use any stock that you like. I prefer using the cubes simply because they're quite cheap, and also if you've never tried to boil rice, whether you like brown or white rice, with a little bit of a bouillon cube in, it can really just enhance the flavor of rice that can otherwise be quite plain. So yeah, just letting that kind of dissolve. My onion is going over here, and almost ready for me to add the rest of the ingredients. And here we go. Today I'm using a mix of beef and pork mince. That was what was on special in my supermarket. I normally make this with beef, but you can obviously make it, you can replace the meat with beans if you're a vegetarian, or if you just want to stay on a budget. Obviously meat is a little bit more expensive, especially at the moment with grocery prices going up around the world. So I normally just keep an eye out in my supermarket what's cheap at that particular week when I am doing my shopping. So yeah, just browning the mince, but also do remember that this is going to continue to simmer in the pot, so it doesn't actually need to cook fully through. So I've got a tiny bit of pink left there, but that's kind of okay, because now we're going to start adding the other bits of this soup. So chucking in a little bit of minced garlic. You can obviously use fresh garlic, probably my preference, but I didn't have any on this particular day. But it's really nice to get that fragrance in there. And it's winter here in Australia at the moment, so these nice warm hearty meals are just really nice. So I've got 2 cans of diced tomatoes that I'm just kind of stirring in here, and then we are going to go and add in my vegetables. As you can see, I definitely need to get a bigger pot for these sort of exercises, because I tend to like totally overdo it and then go, how the heck am I going to fit all this in my pot? If you are like me and very optimistic about these things, please leave a comment down below. All right, so my cubes there were mostly dissolved, so I added a bit of water along with those cubes. And now we are just going to let this basically simmer on the stove. I'm also just rinsing out a tiny bit of water to get the last little bit of tomato and flavor out. So now we're going to get this up to a simmer and let it simmer for probably 30 to 40 minutes, depending on the texture that you like your vegetables to be. But this is really quite nice, and I did forget to show you that you can also add a little bit of either Worcestershire sauce or bay leaves to make this really nice. Anyway, what I'm doing here is just scooping up the dinners that we are going to be having throughout the week. And these tubs are, you can't really tell, but they're quite large. So one of these tubs will comfortably feed my husband and I for dinner. So yeah, just getting all the good stuff out of the pot here and making sure that I'm not leaving anything behind. And it was such a beautiful meal. We actually also ended up having this for lunch on the day, on this Sunday when I was cooking this. So it doesn't look like much, but this with a piece of bread is so nice and warm and comforting. Next up, we are going to make some fried rice. This is such a budget-friendly recipe. You can make it vegetarian. I'm using eggs in this one, so it is a vegetarian but not a vegan recipe. But this is so easy to vary however you like. I'm using frozen vegetables for this. You don't have to. You could use other veggies as well. And normally I use soy sauce for this recipe, gluten-free soy sauce, but I had this bottle of coconut aminos that I wanted to use up as well. So here are all the ingredients we're going to need. I have pressed a fair bit of the liquid out of the tofu. If you haven't cooked with tofu before because you find it a bit slimy or you don't like the texture, I can highly recommend oven baking or oven roasting your tofu. So what I've done is I've pressed a fair bit of the liquid out of this tofu. It's a firm tofu and it is very cheap compared to meat, especially at the moment. And I'm cutting this up into small cubes so that I can roast them and make sure that they're of an even size. Chucking in a little bit of oil, my coconut aminos, and you can either use corn flour, you could use these, I'm using gluten-free breadcrumbs because that's what I had on hand. But basically what I want to do is coat this tofu slightly in something that's going to help it crunch up a little bit. That's the texture that I personally prefer. And now I've got my my oven liner there, which is so silicone liners. I will link them below. I really like them. Also helps you not waste baking paper, etc. So we're going to chuck that in the oven, and while that's happening, I am cracking my eggs. For this recipe, I'm using 6 eggs, which is going to make quite a bit of food that you'll see here later. So just some salt and pepper and whisking up my eggs, because what I'm going to do first up is to scramble these eggs and then set them aside. There are many different recipes for fried rice. This is just how I do it. So on the stove here, I've got my pot with a little bit of olive oil. And I'm going to start by scrambling my eggs. And you want to make sure that you don't overcook them because this is a meal prep. So I'm going to add these eggs back in later. By the way, you've got my little kitty cat Freya there in the background if you've never met her. So I'm scrambling these up but making sure that they're still fluffy because they're going to go back in this pan later, and they're also going to obviously be reheated. So I don't want to overcook my eggs. In the same pan, I'm tossing in my vegetables. This is a mix of all sorts of stir-fry veggies, including onion. And it had very, very big chunky bits of broccoli. So I'm just cutting that up into more bite-sized pieces because I also love broccoli. So I wanted to have that a little bit more spread out throughout my meal. When the veggies have started to cook through and heat up a little bit because they were frozen, I'm tossing in a little bit of garlic and ginger. If you don't like ginger, you absolutely don't have to use it, but I just think it really enhances this meal a little bit. And now I'm adding in my rice here. Now the key to good fried rice is to use cold rice. So in this instance, I boiled this rice earlier in the morning of the day when I was meal prepping. Because it just, I don't know, it's something about cold rice. Actually, a great thing to use, this is a great recipe as well to use up if you have any cold leftover rice hanging out in your fridge. Or if you want to take a shortcut, you can use those rice pouches, like ready-made instant rice that you can use. But you can see here that I've kind of tossed everything up. I've got a reasonably high heat on here. And yeah, just making sure to stir everything together, and I added a little bit of chili, sesame oil, and other seasoning that you can see there. And when I'm happy with the texture and the kind of slight browning of the rice, I'm tossing my eggs back in. And that's essentially all you want to do for this dish. And I've got my lens fogging up there, but I've got my tofu coming out of the oven. So this is really nice and crunchy, and I really, really like tofu this way. So let's dish this up and see how many meals we can turn this into. If you are on a really tight budget, you can bulk it up with a lot more rice than I did in this particular instance, but we prefer a fairly balanced protein and vegetable to rice ratio. But if you're on a really tight budget, bulk out the rice and the vegetables and keep your protein pretty low. So I was hoping for 6 portions here, but I ended up with 5, which is totally fine. And all I'm going to do now is to top and add in my my tofu on top. This is obviously being made to be reheated. The key as well to reheating fried rice is to put just a tiny bit of water in whatever container you're using to just kind of rehydrate the rice a little bit, and it turns out super yummy. And the final thing I'm going to do is actually make a little bit of a treat with a gluten-free apple crumble. This recipe is really simple. I will link it below for you, but I've got butter, salt, some sugar, gluten-free flour because my husband is gluten-free, and some cinnamon. And obviously I've got my apples as well. Now I had quite a bit of apples because I bought some on special, so I wanted to use this opportunity. So you want to peel your apples and make sure that you slice them up into nice similar sized slices. And here I'm using my brand new baking dish to lay them out in a fairly even layer. I find that the key to a good crumble is to make sure that you're not stacking it too tall, so that the apples kind of cook through and all the little bits of apple get a bit of crumble on them. So you sprinkle a tiny bit of cinnamon and sugar, and then I am taking my wedding ring and my engagement ring off because we're going to get our hands dirty. If you have a better way of getting like blending the butter into the crumble, let me know. Um, but anyway, here I've got my gluten-free flour and my butter. Room temperature butter is a lot easier to work with, by the way. And so I'm getting my flour in there. You can also add some oats to this recipe if you prefer, but I'm just getting my sugar and my salt in there as well. And now it is time to just mix, mix, mix. And this can actually take a little while. It's actually, my butter was a little bit too hard, so I wish I would have put it out a little bit earlier to kind of just get to room temperature, but that doesn't really matter. So anyway, I'm mixing this up nice and well because you want to make sure that it is well incorporated. And while doing this, I'm always listening to a podcast or some music or something. And this is actually part of the whole self-care thing that this meal prepping does, at least for me, is that I make sure that I'm just really having a little bit of fun while I'm doing this. So this is the sort of the texture that you want of your crumble, or that I prefer. And then you just sprinkle that out as evenly as you can in your dish. And that's pretty much it. And now we're going to move over and pop this in the oven for, I think I had it in for about 20 to 25 minutes. Turned out so yummy. And if you want a healthy option and not use cream, I actually serve mine with yogurt. The third thing that I often do when things get a bit too much, and I've learnt this as I get older because I certainly didn't used to do this, but it's to press pause on anything that is not necessary. So, for example, that party or family function that you actually don't want to go to and you just said yes because you should go, it's okay to say no to those things, or helping somebody else out if you feel like your batteries are running really low for yourself. And actually, things like doing dishes or doing things with your hands is something that I particularly enjoy when things feel just a little bit too much. And on this particular day, it was rainy and cold outside, and I was just looking out my window, and my husband was doing some chores in the background, and we were chatting and listening to a podcast and just unpacking a few things that have been happening in our world lately. And that is the thing about pressing pause and slowing down. Like, you don't have to justify the things that you like doing or that help you. I particularly enjoy things like dishes or cleaning in small spurts, not massive declutters when I'm feeling really tired. But it does help because you can see the difference really quickly in your space. Another thing I've been enjoying a lot lately is crocheting. So that little neck scarf that you see me wearing in this clip, I've actually made myself, taught myself to crochet. So it's been really nice, whether we're sort of got a movie on in the background or listening to a podcast, to just you know, take the time, create something with your hands, and allow your mind to quiet down a little bit, because when things get hard, those are the times when we need those extra little batteries. So I hope you've enjoyed spending this time with me, and I really encourage you to have a think about, if you didn't take anyone else into account, even if you're a parent, think just about yourself for a minute and ask yourself what pressing pause on a few things would look like for you. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's video and spending some time with me. Please take a second, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel via that little button below and turn on the notification bell, which will give you a little ping every time I post a video, so you can check that out. I love the community here, and if you have any tips on how you cope when things get really busy, or you feel like your organization systems are not quite keeping up, please comment in the comment box below so we can learn from each other. Finally, if you need a little bit of help to get organized in your life or in your world, I actually have a very low-cost online course. You can check it out below. It's the first link in the description box, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Have a great week.